Biden is willfully opening the floodgates to a tidal wave of illegal immigration, the likes of which the world has never seen before. No country has this ever happened to. He's deliberately inciting a mob of millions and millions of foreign nationals to illegally infiltrate America's borders, violate our laws, trample our sovereignty, and settle in our country.
That's former President Donald Trump ripping into his successor's handling of the border crisis as DHS braces for 18,000 migrants a day when the Biden administration ends Title 42 next month.
Mark Levin, the great one, is the host of Life, Liberty, and Levin, and he joins us now. Mark, thanks so much. We always love having you. We want to get your... We've been talking all morning, Rachel, Will, and I, about the idea that Title 42... it's a Band-Aid to begin with, right? I mean, this administration has used it as an excuse to kind of enforce the border, but it's in replacement of an actual border policy. You heard what President Trump said. Your reaction to how the Biden administration is approaching this issue at this point?
Well, you know, there's a clause in the Constitution, Article 2, Clause 5. It's called the Take Care Clause. It's been litigated in the Supreme Court since Marbury versus Madison. It's been litigated and is definitive. The president is to, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed, unquote. A president doesn't have a choice about what laws to enforce, whether he likes the laws or not. He's the executive. He's to execute. He doesn't write laws. His administration is the most radical administration in American history. It is rewriting our immigration laws. It is ignoring or effectively suspending existing immigration laws. These are impeachable offenses. I don't need to create impeachable offenses here. I don't need to say, oh, look at the transcript. He used this word rather than that word. This administration is proudly destroying American sovereignty. Now, when you're talking about 18,000 people a day, you multiply that by 30. You're talking about 500,000 people every month or so. That's the size of a substantial city. Where are all these people going? Where are they going to eat? Are they going to get jobs? Are they going to be on the welfare rolls? Are they going to be using our public services? They're giving them cell phones. Are they going to get health care? They get free education as a matter of Supreme Court precedent. And they get free health care initially as a matter of Supreme Court precedent. What else are they going to get? How many of these people hate us? How many of these people are criminals? How many of these people are bringing communicable diseases? How many of them are drug traffickers? How many of them are sex traffickers? Biden doesn't care. Well, my attitude about this is the greatest crisis facing the United States of America today. The consequences of this for generations to come, it's unimaginable what's going to happen to this country. You cannot have a country, a civil society, a unified culture when your border is wide open. There's not another country on the face of the earth that's doing what we are doing. And this is intentional. This is the defunding of ICE and the defunding of the Border Patrol through the back door. Do they get paid? Yes. But they don't get paid to do their jobs. They're literally prohibited from doing their jobs. Those are the orders coming on from down high. So what's going on here? What's going on here is this is part of the American Marxist attitude about America. White dominant society, it needs to be changed. People coming into this country from Central and South America are actually the indigenous peoples. People coming from overseas, if they can change the white dominant society, more the better. Why do I say this? Because it's the same administration pushing critical race theory and all the other agenda items on the radical left. And I would note, but for a few Democrats on the border, the Democrat Party is either celebrating this or utterly silent about it. What has Schumer said about it? Nothing. What has Pelosi said about it? Nothing. And the media, other than Fox, maybe a few others, how many media platforms have reporters staked out there to watch what's going on or what's going to go on? The sex trafficking. Whatever happened to the cages? Did they go away? No, there's more than ever before. The rapes that are taking place, all that's going on, the mayhem, the anarchy, the criminality that's taking place there. It's as if it's not going on. It's as if it's Hunter Biden's laptop. So this is a very, very serious problem. President Trump, in my lifetime, was the only president really to get this under control. He followed the law. He followed the court orders. He moved money legally around to build the wall. The walls were almost done. But no country can survive what Joe Biden's doing to this country.
You know, Mark, I'm so fascinated by the motivation, which you begin talking about there, the motivation behind all of this. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a denial of sovereignty. It is not disconnected from critical race theory. It's a denial of our past and our border. It's a denial of nationalism, of America, of the idea of the United States of America. So, Mark, if you play that forward, you know, and you spin that off into the ultimate goal, what does it look like? What does our future look like?
This is an effort to destroy the traditions and customs and institutions of the United States, one way or another. When they talk about packing the Supreme Court, when they're violating separation of powers, when they want to nationalize the voting system with the borders wide open, when they want to move all the power to Washington and out of the private sector with the big deal plan or whatever the hell it's called, or something like that, for when they nominate and now have confirmed the most radical justice in American history, and they do it in 20 hours. There's not even a vacancy yet on the Supreme Court, if you think about it. When you look at the executive orders that Joe Biden has signed, when you look at how he talks about the American people, we are racist, we are homophobic. Does he understand this is the greatest country on the face of the earth, no thanks to him, and no thanks to the people who are destroying it? You look at the United States military, the social experimentation and engineering that's going on with the greatest fighting force on the face of the earth. Every aspect, every institution of this culture is under attack, from the classroom, from the military, law enforcement, our finances, our currency with inflation, people on pensions, other hardworking people who live paycheck to paycheck. Do the Democrats and do Joe Biden really seem sympathetic to the average guy in this country? Not in the least. They're full of propaganda, but they want to control the middle class because controlling the middle class controls the country. So that's what's going on. This is part of a bigger thing. I wrote about it in American Marxism. I'm just saying it's part of a bigger movement. And of course, when you're attacking the very founding of the nation, when you're pulling down monuments of Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant and others, when you're effectively book burning and replacing books with all kinds of perversion and so forth in our public schools, when you push God out of the public square and pull transgenderism into the public square, I'm just being honest, you're destroying the culture. And when you have a law that's passed in Florida that has as its purpose to protect little babies from sexuality and all kinds of personal sexual preferences being imposed upon them, and that's considered radical and right-wing and so forth, something terrible has gone wrong. And let me tell you something. The saboteurs are not the American people. They are the self-appointed elitists in this country, the politicians, the think tanks, the media, the self-appointed elitists. The vast majority of the American people aren't buying any of this stuff.
Yeah. It's a revolution, Mark. It definitely is a revolution, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. I want to move to another subject because it is something that's finally coming out, and that is acknowledgement by the mainstream media that the laptop from hell is real. And now we have watchdog groups that are saying, hey, we also need to look at UPenn, which has the Biden Center, and there were some anonymous donations from China. We need to look at that. But, you know, where is the FBI? I mean, where is the forensic audit on the Biden family and the fact that we now know through those emails, Mark, that Hunter Biden was paying his father's bills? None of us here have kids who pay our bills. There's obviously smoke here. Why is it taking so long for even these kinds of financial audits to happen?
Because Joe Biden's a Democrat. Now, the bottom line is this. You look at the laptop from hell being Hunter Biden. You look at that laptop. There are multiple mentions of Joe Biden. There's multiple mentions of the commingling of finances. There's multiple mentions of him getting a cut of the action. We have an eyewitness to that effect, Bob Alinsky, who is a serious person and a serious witness. We have him complaining to his daughter about 50% of his salary is basically going to his father, that he paid for some things for his father. Meanwhile, we have Democrats investigating Donald Trump, the DA in Manhattan, the Attorney General in New York who should be disbarred, in my view. We have this rogue January 6th committee who asked where the FBI is. They proudly keep announcing that they've applied more resources than any time in American history to chasing down misdemeanors, people who are trespassing and people who are parading on government property. That's like chasing down people who are jaywalking. Go for the violent people. Do you really need the entirety of the FBI to go after violent people on a January? Of course not. But this is the narrative, this is the push, this is the same FBI that tried to take out President Trump. That thing needs to be fumigated. It needs to be cleared from top to bottom. Unfortunately, you know, when I was Chief of Staff to Attorney General Meese, we had the greatest pride in that institution. I have no reliance whatsoever in that institution anymore. So it's the corruption of the media, it's the corruption of Washington, and it's the corruption of the Democrat Party that was behind the Russia collusion fake disaster as that was.
Is Joe Biden compromised, Mark?
Well, I think he is. I also think he's corrupt. I mean, you're looking at least $13.5 million that went to the Biden family. And if you look at it, it's probably much more than that from foreign governments, from front groups, from the, it's absolutely shocking. This Washington Post piece last week was a joke. They basically pulled the information from the Grassley-Johnson report and pulled the information from the laptop that was already publicly available through the New York Post and other entities. And in the 5th paragraph, they said there's no evidence linking Joe Biden to anything. Now, do you think Donald Trump would get a pass like that? Of course not. 60 Minutes, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, they should be barking at the top of their lungs at investigation. I've been calling for a special counsel now for a long time. And the reason's quite simple. Meritless Garland is incapable of conducting an investigation of this. This is why the special counsel exists in the first place. They had no basis whatsoever for appointing a special counsel against Trump. Trump hadn't done anything, and he wasn't really accused of doing anything when you look at the accusations. Here, I don't know how you miss it. It's in the newspapers, at least some of them. It's on our network, it's in other places, it's on the laptop. The incuriosity is really quite remarkable. And Merrick Garland is going to dig in, and of course the Democrats have not held a single hearing, not one, into Hunter Biden, his laptop, the communist Chinese money. Even the Washington Post admits $4.8 million. $4.8 million went to the Biden family. $4.8 million from a communist Chinese front company went to the Biden family. And there was a great piece in the Federalist the other day by a gentleman, and he said, Biden hasn't released his tax returns. He's released his individual tax returns. But the vast majority of the money Biden has went through two S corporations that have not released their tax returns. Two S corporations that the media simply do not care about. $13 million, he calculates, went into these companies, and not a single concern about releasing those taxes. You know, Donald Trump came into office a multi-billionaire, and they're obsessed with his tax returns even now. We have people who come into office and become multimillionaires, or leave office and become multimillionaires, and nobody cares about their taxes.
Absolutely, Mark. It's stunning. By the way, I'm not just saying this because I'm a fan, but that first answer, all of them, but that first answer on immigration is probably the best articulation summary of what we're up against. You've been so generous with your time this morning. Give us a preview of what's coming up on Life, Liberty, and Levin tonight.
Well, speaking of immigration, we give Stephen Miller a good half of the program, and he really is fantastic. And David Mamet, who was raised by effectively communists and is one of the greatest playwrights in American history. My second part of my interview with him, he just unleashes. I think the American people will enjoy it very much.
Great. We'll be watching Mark definitely for the second part. Definitely.
Mark,
with
thank you
David
very
Mamet.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything you guys do.
Thanks, Mark.